Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today, I have you down in our basement so that I can talk to you about the Origins gaming table. You see, Season 2 is now on Kickstarter, and last year, or a little bit over a year ago, they raised over $1 million to bring, I think, 800 plus backers their own board game table. And I've lived with mine for the better part of a year now, so I thought it'd be a good chance to tell you about having a game table in general, my overall experience, the positives of the Origin, and the negatives of the Origin. I want to give you as much information so you can make an informed decision around whether or not this is going to be a table you want to add to your collection. Now, here's the thing, and I will be honest with you in two regards. First and foremost, I was sent this table from Game Theory Tables. Now, again, it was over a year ago, but keep that in mind. And secondly, I will be advocating for you to consider backing their project for one very, very salient reason. At right around $2,500 or $2,800 if you get it deluxeified, and I'll tell you how I would do that, this is one of the most affordable and well-built gaming tables on the market. I've seen a lot of tables. I have a lot of $8,000, $9,000, $15,000 tables I'd love to own, talking to a company some of you might know, but in the case of your first table, the table that's going to live with you for the next 5 to 10 years, a table that can be a little beat up, can be used, can be functional around a family or around like a bachelor with his game night, I think the Origin is one you should consider. So, let me tell you about it, and let's start by talking about, well, having a game table in general. Let's start the conversation for those of you who have never owned or considered owning a game table. What makes a game table unique or different from your average classic table? Well, first and foremost is going to be the fact that your board game tables are going to be designed with 2 layers to them, meaning that this table comes in 3 sections, and as long as the light doesn't get too bright there behind me, and as long as I don't mess up Sleeping Gods because we're currently playing through it, I can actually remove and take off an entire leaf. Oh, and it is heavy, but I can remove and take off an entire leaf of this table. And I can do that the whole way down the line, meaning that there's this inlay of about maybe 2.5, 3 inches where something else can be played here. You see, we have Sleeping Gods set up there on one end, and down here we're getting started on a puzzle, which I'm not necessarily the best at puzzles, but I am excited to be trying one. The other cool thing about a gaming table is it gives you a place to think about playing games. It gives you a dedicated spot where you know you can have something set up. You can save it for later, you can invite friends over, and sometimes just having a space in your home that is dedicated to playing board games, that is in an environment built around playing board games, that allows you to store, put away, save, or keep a campaign running, helps you get games to the table better than almost any other system. One of the most compelling reasons why you should consider getting a board game table, whether it's the Origin or any other one, is that a board game table will make you play games more. It just will. Having a space, something that is always salient and always on your mind, that makes it easier to get games off the shelf and set down in front of you, will mean you play more games. Now, if you've resolved to pick up a game table at this point, let's talk about the Origin. And let's start by talking about the pros. Let me break down the 3 most salient things that you should keep in mind when deciding if this is going to be the right game table for you or not. First and foremost, this is a heavy table. And I mean that. This is a sturdy, shifting, hard to lift, chunky table, and having moved with it 3 times over the course of the last year and a half that I've owned it, trust me, I felt the weight every step of the way. This table's held up really well. It's constructed in a very simple, almost abrasive fashion, breaks down and goes up easily, and it doesn't fall apart. It really does feel like you can put your weight against it, you could stand on top of it, you could, let me just demonstrate. This table is able to support whatever you're going to throw at it. That's just the nature of the beast. Now, it's not refined in every regard. It's hefty around the edges and hefty on the corners and hefty in the middle, but that heftiness makes it feel like a very welcoming and steadfast place to play a game. Number 2 is going to be the playing surface. Down here, we have a suede. And the company, Game Theory Tables, usually makes poker tables. It's where their origin comes from. And this suede, not only does it print incredibly beautiful designs on it, we have a custom yellow Quackalope logo, but the suede here is, as far as I've found, my favorite playing surface so far, with one exception. The one exception I have is every time I film videos that I put here on the channel, you'll notice that I use a heavy wool blanket. I like how it lays, I like how it pulls down, I like the texture for playing games on. But that is only within a context of not having something like this. If you're using a folding table, get a heavy wool blanket. If you're playing on a board game table, though, I really, really like the quality and production here on this material. It cleans up incredibly well. I have a giant lint roller to help with that, and it just feels amazing to play with. Finally, the last thing that I want to mention is going to be the depth here. You see, one of the things that a lot of people think about when they are looking for a game table that has storage space underneath is going to be just how many board games or how big of a board game can you store. And the answer here is simple. You can store most of your heavy miniatures games, with maybe the few exceptions of a few of your bigger miniatures, that all you'll need to do is set off to the side and remember where they plop down back on the board. I'm talking everything in Kingdom Death with the exception of the Phoenix, for instance. This is a great example of that. I believe this is a 2.5 or 3 inch separator here that is deep enough for almost nearly anything. That being said, that depth is sometimes a challenge. It does make it harder to reach kind of across the table. You might need to stand up in order to get everything, and if you're playing solo, that depth can be something that you struggle against. Depending on how you save, store, and keep your games, you'll have to make the decision. But I really do appreciate, for this table in particularly, just how deep this recess is. It means that whatever we're playing can be stored safely and confidently. So, with that established, let's talk about the cons of the Origin gaming table, and you're going to hear something very similar to something that I've already said. First and foremost is going to be that this table is heavy. These panels are heavy. They're clunky. They're big to move and take off. And if you're regularly sitting down to play, you'll notice that this table is just a lot, right? It's beefy, sure, it doesn't shake or shift, but one of the consequences to that is knowing where you're going to be storing your panels, where you're going to be putting your table, because maneuvering it, pushing it around your house, or repositioning it after you have it is not going to be something that you're going to want to do often. And depending on your own personal fitness level, it may be hard at times for you to get these big hunks off without an extra hand or two. Now, it's not impossible, and I can easily do it myself, but it does mean I have to be careful, right? Not to pinch my fingers or have them bang against other things to get damaged and stuff like that. Next is going to be the height, which again is the second thing that I mentioned. And I know positives and consequences. One of the bad parts about how deep this is that it means the table is slightly uncomfortable to sit at, especially when you have the topper on. I actually prefer playing with the topper off because there's about 1.5 inches worth of what I describe as like an odd table sensation. If you're sitting around the table, you'll notice with the topper on, you're adding this additional lip here. And this additional lip is the difference between you feeling like you're sitting at a regular height with regular chairs and a regular dining room table versus feeling like you're slightly small, sitting at a giant's table, reaching across the middle and barely being able to reach that far end. This table is big, it's massive, but it's accentuated by the fact that it's a little bit bigger and taller and thicker in every dimension than maybe I would prefer. Makes it heavy, makes it sturdy, makes it something that's going to last, but conversely, it also means that it does feel giant. It feels different than a regular dining room table does. I have a harder time reaching things with the top on or off, and when I'm sitting with the top on, I feel it's just a little bit too high for me to rest comfortably. I find that when I'm sitting at the Origin, I'll stand up, move around, reach to pick up things, and then sit back down, oftentimes on my knee or my leg to give myself a little bit of a height. Now, the things that I've seen other people do to counteract this, because it is a controllable factor, buy chairs that are a little bit taller, certainly an option. Put a little bit of plywood underneath the middle pad here to raise it up by about half an inch, giving you a slightly more reachable and accessible play surface. Play primarily with the top off and use the top on for eating or dining, and put padding underneath your chairs to raise them up just to that point where it's comfortable. All of these are options, but they are things that you should keep in mind when you decide to back this. And then lastly, the last thing that I'd say I'm critical of when it comes to the Origins game table, which you do have to take with a grain of salt, because at $2,500 this is a pricey table, but it's not a pricey board game table. The last thing that I'd be critical of is the fact that, in my experience, over the course of the year and moving 3 times, the table has held up well, but not perfectly. And the degree of production, the craftsman's promise type of approach, isn't here in every aspect of the table like I wish it was. You see, I love this product. I'm super grateful to have this table, and there's no way that we won't be continuing to play on it and just have it as part of our daily routine. That being said, as the years go on, I become more and more disappointed with areas that I see nicks and dings where the paint has chipped up or scratches remain from shifting table tiles on and off. You can see a little ding right there. Now, over the course of a year and heavy play and lots of moving, I understand that these are bound to happen. But I would, if I were you and looking into purchasing this, or if I was getting another one of my own, I might cover it in a final coat of lacquer or sealant or some sort of matte finish to give me that little bit of barrier, that extra degree of protection. Because I don't know that it's here, but it certainly hasn't held up. And the paint pens that I was sent to fix up little dings and errors really don't do the job. They don't match the quality, so don't assume that you can fix a nick or a scratch with some other mitigation. I haven't found a good solution to that yet. Now, I don't mind because this is a living, working table, but I think it will grow to bother people more and more, and as time goes on, I think it'll grow to bother me more and more as well. Now, the last thing that I was going to note, and please keep in mind that I'm working with a pre-production copy, so I don't actually know what the final versions were like 100%, but there are elements around here where craftsmanship, I think, is lower than I would prefer it to be. But you'll notice, for instance, the underside of the table, when you're building it, there's some paint spillage, or areas that maybe haven't been sanded and polished or refined down. And I can even show you here on my divider. You can see this lip here, right? Is open wood, it's not too refined, it's not cut so that it fits exactly perfectly. I have to wiggle it into place a little bit. So, those are my initial thoughts. That's where I am when it comes to the Origins game table. Now, what would I recommend you backing if you're going to go back this Kickstarter? Because I do think that it is a good deal. If I was going to back the Kickstarter now, I would go for the Origins game table itself. I would go for the topper, which I think right now price point puts you at $2,500 for those 2 items, which is an aggressive price. And then I would go for the custom mat. Get your favorite game or graphic or an icon or a logo or just a color that you really love. And that high quality suede, in my opinion, makes a substantial difference. So, there we have it. I'm happy to answer any other questions you have down below. I know the Kickstarter has other things going on as well. The Origins coffee table or the bench that allows you to store your table toppers in a more easily accessible way. I personally haven't experienced any of those. And while I do hope to get a copy of the Origins coffee table, and I'd love to have a copy of the bench to place down here in the basement, I can't speak towards them at the moment. What I can say, though, is if you get a table, whichever one it is, I hope you find space for it. I hope you are able to play more games, because that's the hope, right? So, whatever the case, whatever you do, Remember to do the important thing, get out and play some games, and we'll see you next time. I think Sheer and I are going to keep diving into Sleeping Gods here, because we've been enjoying it a lot.